Daniel had always been drawn to the serenity of the forest. Its towering trees and whispering leaves offered him solace from the chaos of his daily life. But on this particular evening, as dusk settled over the woodland, Daniel's peaceful retreat would transform into a nightmare he could never have imagined. As he wandered along a narrow trail, the fading light casting eerie shadows around him, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Each rustle of leaves and snap of twigs sent shivers down his spine, and he quickened his pace, eager to reach the safety of his campsite. But just as he thought he had escaped the creeping unease, he caught sight of something out of the corner of his eye. Turning, he saw them, naked figures, devoid of faces, emerging from the darkness of the trees. Their movements were jerky, almost mechanical, as if they were puppets being controlled by some unseen force. Heart pounding, Daniel broke into a run, his footsteps echoing through the silent forest. But no matter how fast he ran, the figures kept pace, their featureless faces turned in his direction. Panic clawed at his chest as he realized there was no escape, nowhere to hide from the relentless pursuit. With every passing moment, the forest seemed to close in around him, the trees bending and twisting like gnarled fingers reaching out to claim him. Daniel's breath came in ragged gasps as he stumbled over roots and fallen branches, his mind consumed by terror. And then, just when he thought he could go no further, he burst into a small clearing, the moonlight casting a ghostly glow over the scene. Gasping for air, Daniel skidded to a halt, his eyes wide with horror as he realized he was not alone. Standing in the center of the clearing were more of the faceless figures, their pale bodies illuminated by the silver light. They made no move towards him, but their presence alone was suffocating, pressing down on him from all sides. Desperate for escape, Daniel turned to flee, but before he could take a single step, a voice echoed through the darkness, chilling him to the bone. "Welcome to our forest, Daniel," it whispered, a cold, mocking tone that sent shivers down his spine. "You belong to us now." Frozen in fear, Daniel could only watch as the figures closed in around him, their featureless faces twisted into grotesque caricatures of smiles. He tried to scream, but no sound escaped his lips, trapped in the vice-like grip of terror. As the figures drew nearer, Daniel's mind raced, searching for any means of escape. But the forest seemed to have become a labyrinth, its twisting paths leading only deeper into the darkness. He was trapped, a mouse cornered by hungry cats. But then, as if by some miracle, a flicker of hope ignited within him. Remembering a small cave he had stumbled upon earlier in the day, Daniel made a split-second decision and bolted towards it, his legs pumping with adrenaline-fueled strength. The cave mouth yawned open before him, a gaping maw in the side of the hillside. With one final burst of energy, Daniel threw himself inside, his heart pounding in his chest. For a moment, all was silent, save for the ragged sound of his breath echoing off the walls. Daniel pressed himself against the cold stone, willing his heart to slow, his mind racing as he waited for his pursuers to find him. But to his surprise, minutes stretched into hours, and still there was no sign of the faceless figures. Had he imagined them? Was he losing his mind? Unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, Daniel crept to the mouth of the cave, peering out into the night. The forest lay quiet, and still, the moon hanging low in the sky like a watchful sentinel. And then, just as he was about to dismiss the whole ordeal as a trick of the mind, he saw them, the figures emerging from the shadows once more, their empty eyes fixed on the mouth of the cave. With a sinking heart, Daniel realized the truth. There was no escape from the horrors of the forest. He was trapped in a nightmare from which he would never awaken, condemned to wander its dark depths for all eternity. Daniel's breath caught in his throat as he watched the figures draw closer, their silent footsteps echoing off the forest floor. He knew he couldn't stay hidden in the cave forever. Sooner or later, they would find him. Gathering what little courage remained within him, Daniel made a decision. He would confront the faceless beings, demand answers, and perhaps find a way to break free from their sinister grasp. Stepping out of the cave, Daniel squared his shoulders, his eyes locking onto the nearest figure. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice trembling but defiant. "What do you want from me?" The figures paused, their movements halting as if considering his words. Then, in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, they spoke. "We are the guardians of this forest," they intoned, their words reverberating through the air like a death knell. "We have watched over its secrets for centuries, and we will not allow you to leave." Daniel's heart sank at the realization that there was no reasoning with these creatures. They were beyond comprehension, beyond humanity. But still, he refused to give in to despair. Summoning every ounce of courage he possessed, Daniel took a step forward, his gaze unwavering. "I will not be your prisoner," he declared, his voice ringing out into the night. "I will find a way to escape, no matter what it takes." With that, he turned and ran, his footsteps pounding against the forest floor. Behind him, he could hear the figures giving chase, their unearthly cries filling the air. But this time, Daniel was not alone. As he fled through the darkness, a glimmer of light appeared on the horizon, beckoning him forward like a beacon of hope. With renewed determination, he raced towards it, his heart filled with the belief that somehow, someway, he would find a way to break free from the clutches of the forest and its faceless guardians. And though the road ahead would be fraught with danger and uncertainty, Daniel knew one thing for certain: he would never give up the fight for his freedom. With a cry of triumph, Daniel raced towards the safety of the path, his heart soaring with relief. Behind him, he heard the faint echo of footsteps, but he dared not look back. He knew that he had outpaced the faceless figures, at least for now. As he emerged from the forest and into the light of day, Daniel paused to catch his breath, his gaze sweeping over the landscape before him. He was battered and bruised, but he was alive. And though the memory of his harrowing ordeal would haunt him for the rest of his days, Daniel knew that he had emerged from the darkness stronger and more resilient than ever before. With one final glance back at the forest, he turned and walked away, leaving behind the nightmares that had plagued him and embracing the promise of a new beginning. Antonio had been wary of the dense forest that bordered the outskirts of his small town. Stories of lost souls and eerie happenings had woven themselves into the fabric of local folklore, cautioning children to stay far from its shadowy depths. But when his daughter, Emily, vanished without a trace one fog-laden evening, the forest became more than just a backdrop for cautionary tales. It became the heart of a chilling mystery. Emily had been playing near the forest's edge, her laughter carrying through the crisp autumn air, when Antonio's attention momentarily waned. In the blink of an eye, she was gone, swallowed by the looming trees, as if they had a sinister hunger of their own. Panic clawed at Antonio's chest as he and his wife, Maria, scoured the woods, calling out Emily's name until their voices grew hoarse. But the forest remained silent, indifferent to their desperation. Hours turned into days, and days into agonizing weeks, with no sign of Emily. The town rallied together, organizing search parties and plastering missing posters on every available surface, but hope began to wane like the dying light of dusk. Then, one dreary afternoon, as Antonio trudged through the underbrush, his eyes swollen with exhaustion and grief, he stumbled upon something that made his blood run cold: a weathered, grotesque doll, its porcelain face cracked and contorted into a twisted grin. Dread settled over him like a suffocating shroud as he recognized it as Emily's favorite toy. Maria's anguished cry echoed through the forest as she collapsed beside him, clutching the doll to her chest, its lifeless eyes seeming to mock their despair. But little did they know, this grim discovery was only the beginning of their descent into darkness. Days turned into weeks, and still, Emily remained missing, her absence a heavy weight that hung over Antonio and Maria like a permanent storm cloud. But just as they began to resign themselves to a life without their beloved daughter, strange occurrences began to unfold. It started with subtle disturbances, a door creaking open on its own, whispers echoing through empty rooms, shadows dancing along the walls when no one was there. Antonio brushed them off as tricks of an overactive imagination, but Maria couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Then, one moonless night, Maria awoke to find the grotesque doll perched at the foot of their bed, its hollow eyes boring into her soul. With a shiver of revulsion, she hurled it across the room, but when it crashed against the wall, it emitted a bone-chilling laugh that sent shivers down her spine. Antonio, awakened by her cries, rushed to her side, his heart pounding in his chest. But when he saw the doll lying in a heap on the floor, its cracked face twisted into a sinister sneer, he felt a chill grip his heart like icy fingers. As the days passed, the presence haunting their home grew more malevolent, its manifestations escalating from harmless pranks to outright acts of terror. Objects would levitate off tables, furniture would move of its own accord, and sinister whispers would fill the air, promising unspeakable horrors. Desperate for answers, Antonio turned to the only person who might understand their plight, a reclusive old woman rumored to possess knowledge of the supernatural. With trembling hands, he knocked on her door, praying for salvation from the nightmare consuming their lives. But when the door creaked open to reveal the withered crone within, her eyes glinting with ancient wisdom, Antonio knew that their journey into the darkness was far from over. The old woman listened intently as Antonio poured out his tale of woe, her expression unreadable as she stroked her chin thoughtfully. When he finished, she peered at him through narrowed eyes, as if seeing into the depths of his soul. "You have trespassed into realms beyond your understanding," she murmured, her voice like the rustle of dry leaves. "Your daughter's disappearance was no mere accident. It was a harbinger of darker forces at play." With a gnarled hand, she beckoned them inside, gesturing for them to sit before a crackling hearth where shadows danced like specters. There she spoke of ancient legends and forgotten truths, weaving a tapestry of horror that chilled Antonio to the bone. According to the old woman, the forest held secrets older than time itself, secrets that demanded a sacrifice to appease their insatiable hunger. Long ago, the townsfolk had struck a dark bargain with the spirits that dwelled within its depths, offering up innocent souls in exchange for prosperity and protection. And now, it seemed, Emily had become the latest pawn in their twisted game. But there was still hope, the old woman insisted, if they were willing to pay the price. With a solemn nod, Antonio and Maria vowed to do whatever it took to bring their daughter home, even if it meant confronting the darkness that lurked within the heart of the forest. Armed with newfound determination, they set out into the woods once more, guided by the old woman's cryptic instructions and a flicker of hope that burned bright despite the encroaching darkness. Hours turned into days as they journeyed deeper into the heart of the forest, their resolve tested at every turn by unseen forces that sought to drive them mad. But they pressed on, fueled by love and desperation, until at last they stumbled upon a clearing bathed in an eerie, otherworldly glow. There, in the center of the clearing, stood Emily, her eyes vacant and hollow as she clutched the grotesque doll to her chest. With a cry of joy, Antonio and Maria rushed to her side, wrapping her in their arms and vowing never to let her go again. But as they turned to leave, a bone-chilling voice echoed through the trees, sending shivers down their spines. "You have trespassed where mortals dare not tread," it whispered, its words dripping with malice. "Your daughter is ours now, bound to the forest for all eternity." With a sinking feeling in their hearts, Antonio and Maria realized the terrible truth. They had traded one nightmare for another, and their daughter was lost to them forever. And as the shadows closed in around them, swallowing them whole, they knew that some secrets were better left buried in the darkness.